the two words that I want to focus on are the words that Joseph used twice in our text. But God. But God. I want you to see that Joseph made this significant statement after Jacob's death. Verses 15 to 21. Joseph's brothers were living in fear. They had this dreadful thought. What if? I want to tell you something. Those two words can cause a lot of anguish in people's lives. That is the cause of much worry. What if? What if we don't make our budget? What if if our friend that we pray for doesn't get healed? What if? And we drag ourselves into pessimism and fear and unbelief. What if? And I think that's what Joseph's brothers were doing to themselves at this point. They were living in fear. What if Joseph holds a grudge against us? What if Joseph pays us back for what we've done to him? And I want you to notice that they had this dreadful thought, but they also had this careful message. And there's a debate over this. You can choose to disagree with me if you wish, but I question deep in my heart whether Jacob really gave this message. I have a question because I think that the brothers put this message together after Jacob died and presented it to their brother as if Jacob would have said it to them. You can believe, the text doesn't specifically say one way or the other. It's possible that Jacob actually did this, but the text doesn't record that Jacob did that. And I think if that was such a big thing that Jacob did, the text would have recorded it. I personally think the brothers are feeling so bad about what they did, and now that dad has died, they feel they've got to get a way to get on Joseph's good side. Why? Because he's in a very powerful position. And I think what happened was that Joseph's brothers put this letter together as if their dad wrote it to them when he actually didn't write it. You can disagree with me on that, but that's how I understand it. Why do I understand it that way? Because look at what the father says. The father says, I ask you to forgive your brothers. Joseph had already done that. Please forgive the sins of God's servants. That's already should have been understood and accomplished. But sometimes, when we feel guilty, well, put it this way. Do you realize that you can forgive somebody before they ask you for forgiveness? And that everything can be right on your side of the equation, but the other person still feels guilty for what they did because they've never made it right on their side. I think that's what's going on with Joseph's brothers here. And when the message came to Joseph, what does Joseph do? He weeps. Why does he weep? Because he finally realizes that even though he has forgiven his brothers long ago, that they haven't made things right with themselves and God. They haven't truly gotten over it. And Joseph's weeping for the pain that his brothers are going through. So, next verse 18. The brothers threw themselves down before him. By the way, another fulfillment of Joseph's dream way back in the beginning. And Did Joseph want his brothers to be his slaves? Not at all. He wanted his brothers to be his family, not his slaves. And then verse 19 to 21, Joseph reassures them. And the reason that I come up with this idea that I have about how Jacob or Joseph is relating to his brothers and how Jacob probably never really made that comment is because it has all been taken care of back in chapter 45. And Joseph says some of the very same things he said back then. Don't be afraid. Am I in the place of God? In other words, do you know where vengeance comes from? The Bible says, do not seek revenge, but rather leave revenge in the hands of God. I will avenge, I will repay, says the Lord. And Joseph is prepared to leave vengeance in the hands of God. And that's why Joseph says, am I in the place of God? Is vengeance for me to take out on you? Brothers, you don't get it yet. That's not my responsibility. That's God's responsibility. And if you want to get away from vengeance, you need to right your relationship with God. I've already forgiven you. So Joseph says, am I in the place of God? And the answer is no. And then he says these key words that I think are helpful to summarize the whole story. Listen to them carefully. You intended to harm me, but God intended it for good. Have you ever gone through a hard time in your life, and like the poem Footprints in the Sand, you wondered why God allowed you to go through such hard times, and then you found out that God was carrying you? We can go through very difficult times, and we think it's hopeless. But these two words are so special. But God. Don't count him out. Don't ignore that he has a purpose in your life. Don't ignore that he's real. And he's with you. And he's there. When Joseph was sold into slavery, God was there. When Joseph was thrown in the pit, God was there. When Joseph was falsely accused, God was there. When Joseph was in prison, God was there. And wherever you are having a difficult time, having a hard part of your life, going through that hard time, God is there. Don't forget, yes, you have your situation, but God.
Amen.
But God intended it for good, to accomplish the salvation of many lives. And if Joseph hadn't gone through a hard time, if Joseph hadn't become or been thrown in the pit, if Joseph hadn't been sold to slavery, if Joseph hadn't earned the trust of Pharaoh, he would have never been in the position to save the lives from the famine. But God intended it for good. Why do I know that that applies to you and me? We quote the verse often, but I think we misunderstand it. There's a verse in the Bible called Romans 8:28. For we know that God causes all things to work together for good for those who love him and are called according to his purpose. Now think about this. That does not mean that everything in the life of a Christian is good. Hear me out on this one. When your brothers hate you, it is not good. When your brothers throw you into a pit, it is not good. When your brothers sell you into slavery, it is not good. When you are falsely accused, it is not good. But God is amazing, because God is able to take a whole bunch of things that are not good and put them together for good. That's how amazing God is. And God put all those bad things together for good because Joseph loved the Lord and was called according to his purpose. I believe that the whole story of Joseph is summed up in Romans 8:28. It doesn't mean you'll never have a bad time. But it means God has a way of turning your bad time temporarily here now into eternal good, which you might never realize until you get to heaven. God works all things, even bad things, I could add there as a commentary, together for good because you love him and you're called according to his purpose. Okay? So, Joseph says, don't be afraid. I will provide for you and your children. He reassured them, and he spoke kindly to them. God had worked in Joseph's life so that he didn't have any vengeance. He didn't have any bitterness towards his brother. He had brothers. He had forgiven them. And he was being used by God to help those who had planned to harm him. Wow. There's a second significant statement made by Joseph. And this one is a significant statement made before his death. The text makes a huge gap in time between verse 21 and 22. Verse 21 is close to the time when Jacob died. Then many years are skipped, and it's close to the time when Joseph dies, and we are told in the text that Joseph lived to be 110. Therefore, this must be at least 50 years later. But we don't need to know all what happened in those 50 years. The fact is that it's just the text jumps for a point, for a reason. Joseph stayed in Egypt for the rest of his life. His family stayed there too, even his brothers. So there was a reconciliation there somehow. And Joseph lived a total of 110 years. Remember that 17 of those years have been lived in the promised land where he grew up in Canaan. And 93 years he lived in Egypt. So even if he had already lived quite a few years in Egypt by this time, it's still 50 years later. And he saw the third generation of Ephraim's sons. That means the third generation of his oldest sons. And he saw the second generation of Manasseh's sons, his other sons' sons. So he's a grandfather and a great-grandfather. That's what the text is telling us. And they were, Manasseh's grandchildren are placed on Joseph's knees. What does that mean? The text doesn't give the whole story. It just summarizes it. They were placed on his knees for Joseph to bless them, just like his children had been blessed by Jacob. It's another blessing going on. They were placed at Joseph's knees. And then he spoke to his brothers about the future. Verse 24. And this is where the second statement comes in. Joseph says, I am about to die. But God, see that? Will surely come to your aid. Let me talk to you about a man that I respect very highly. His name is Billy Graham. Billy Graham has been used by God in the United States in a real spiritual renewal in the 1950s all the way up to 2000. But in 2005, he had his last evangelistic campaign. And since 2005, we've had about 12 years where Billy Graham hasn't really been active. And in those 12 years, you can see a change in the nation's spiritual health. And what has happened is, God is gently taking Mr. Graham out of the scene. He's 99 years old right now. But just because God takes one of his servants off the scene doesn't mean that he wouldn't have other servants and doing important ministries. God is still at work. Just because Billy Graham's crusades are over doesn't mean that God's not at work anymore. Why do I say that? God was at work in helping the people who were Jacob's family and grandchildren and great-grandchildren. God was at work in helping Israel grow and develop and flourish during the time that Joseph was alive. Now Joseph is coming to the place where he's going to die. And he's saying, just because I am going to die, don't give up hope. God is still going to come to your aid in the future. Just because a pastor dies, just because a father dies, just because a grandfather dies, doesn't mean there's no hope anymore in a family or in a church or whatever. God is still there. God will surely come to your aid, he says. And when he does, Joseph was living in the promise that God would take his people back to Canaan. It hasn't happened for over 93 years, but he believes it's going to happen. And by the way, it didn't happen for another 300 years. But Joseph still believed that it was going to happen. Just because the Lord delays his coming, and now it's 2,000 years since he promised to come, doesn't mean he's not going to come. He's going to come. It just hasn't happened yet. But God will surely come to your aid. He will take you up out of this land. He will take you to the land he promised to Abraham. I know one thing about God, Joseph says. He keeps his promises. And even though we've been ignored and lived in this land for 93 years, God hasn't forgotten us. So, Joseph promised or prophesied about the future just like Jacob had. Now he makes his friend or family, the Israelites, swear an oath to him, verse 25. God will surely come to your aid. Therefore, you must not bury me in Egypt. You must carry my bones up from this place. I am so sure that God is going to deliver you from Egypt that even though you wouldn't be allowed to leave Egypt to bury my bones like Jacob, I was allowed to go bury Jacob's bones, you wouldn't be allowed to do that anymore because there's no Joseph to appeal to. Get my bones embalmed. And when God does his special work, take me out of Egypt with you and bring me back to Canaan, the promised land. Well, that was Joseph arranging his burial just like his dad did. And he died at the age of 110. They embalmed him and put him in a coffin in Egypt. And guess what? They did not bury him because Joseph had requested that they wouldn't bury him. Why? Because his body was supposed to be taken out of Egypt back to Canaan. And guess what? Over time, that's exactly what happened. When you have free time at home, look up Exodus chapter 13, verse 19. And if you look up that text, you will find that Moses brought Joseph's bones out of Egypt at the time of the Exodus. It says it very clearly, Exodus 13, verse 19. And after the people of Israel have wandered for 40 years, remember, they're wandering for 40 years through the desert, and they have Joseph's casket with them all the time. Think about that. He better be embalmed or he would stink pretty bad. So he's embalmed, and his casket is with them for 40 years, and then Joseph's bones were buried by Joshua in Shechem. Joshua chapter 24, verse 32. And why were they buried in Shechem and not in the cave in Mamre? Because Jacob had told Joseph that he was giving him the land of Shechem. Back in the blessing, back in chapter 49. That's what Jacob told Joseph. He was getting the land of Shechem as a blessing above what his brothers had been given. And that's where Joseph was buried, to fulfill the promise of Jacob and to fulfill the prophecy of Joseph, even though it was 400 years later. Isn't that amazing? We can see God's hand in our lives. When we see God's hand in our lives, we can really see the reality of Romans 8:28. In Genesis chapter 1, we begin with the words, "In the beginning, God." Now in Genesis, excuse me. Now in Genesis 50, it ends with, "But God intended it for good. But God will surely come to your aid." Moses is making a point. By the way, Moses is the author of Genesis, okay? Moses is making a point that God is creator, Genesis 1 verse 1, and that God is the sustainer, Genesis 50, of his people. He is the creator and sustainer of his people. And when we miss this point, we miss the message of Genesis. God is there from the beginning, creating all the world, but then moving in to create his people by calling Abraham. God is there sustaining his people through all the hardships that they go through. His hand is with them, even when they're slaves in Egypt. God is there at the beginning, and God sustains you all the way through. Isn't that true with our lives? He's there at the beginning when you were born. He's there at the beginning when you're born again, and he sustains you all the way through. So that's why we need to begin with God. You need to begin your day with God. You need to begin your new year with God. You need to begin your life with God. You need to begin, if you get married, your married life with God. You begin with God, and he sustains you all